I also need to put this live, which should be now. Is it? Cool. And now we're also live, if anyone joins on YouTube. Cool. All right, so I think we'll just go ahead and start. And if the other 2 or 3 are joining later, I guess we'll just fill them in on what we talked about so far.
So it's just us. Nice.
Yeah. Okay, so no new faces this time. So I guess we just skip introductions and just dive right in.
All right, so today we are going to be talking about inclusive practice. In terms of very practical side of things, we want to make sure that we're discussing how to create inclusive environments, which will need some definition of what inclusive practice actually means, and then hopefully moving away from theory into very practical terms. We got some really interesting feedback about that. Just coming straight off was that one of the native French-speaking guys, don't remember his name, commented that if we go too technical, if we go into a point where we talk about something that's very only culturally relevant in an English environment, we're not doing justice to how inclusive practice can change around the world, which I think is a really excellent point that we should all be bearing in mind. So I'm probably going to start by defining inclusive practice, because I think a lot of people get it wrong. People think about inclusive and they're told to be inclusive, and so they say, yeah, we welcome anyone into our community. It doesn't matter if they're young or old or whatever. Inclusive means that we accept everyone. And that's a good starting point, and it's a healthy thing. But actually being inclusive doesn't really work like that. In actual fact, most communities aren't that inclusive and shouldn't be that inclusive. And there can actually be a lot of problems with trying to make a group more inclusive. Because an inclusive practice is a practice that recognizes diversity and makes sure everyone is able to access that practice and fully engage with it, regardless of the background. Which means that instead of actually treating everyone the same, you have to treat people very individually based on who they are and what they need. So for instance, treating a 50-year-old turning up to your class the same as an 18-year-old turning up to your class makes no sense. You have to adapt how you behave in order to accept them in. And the thing about that that's very important to realize is that you don't have to be entirely inclusive, and nearly no society is entirely inclusive, because by putting ourselves in some form of box, we define who we are. Like, we want people interested in parkour practice to come to our parkour classes. We don't want people who aren't interested in parkour to be there. So at the very outset, we're not being perfectly inclusive. Everything is just now a discussion of scale.
Yeah.
All of that is mostly meaningless rubbish in some ways, because it's true you want to get more people into your parkour classes. That's your definition of inclusive. And I think to a certain extent, we should just move forward from there.
Okay, so as far as I understand you now, so being inclusive doesn't mean, I think the key phrase there was not to treat everyone the same, but to treat everyone sort of the way that they can participate in the classes?
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess just to make sure today we're more talking about how to create like inclusive parkour classes, because I mean, we can also, or we could also talk about the parkour culture more like in general, but I think for our context, it makes more sense to focus on like the educational context, so to speak.
Okay.
Okay. So what would you think, like, how does an inclusive class look like?
For one thing, if you are doing an inclusive environment for classes, you probably don't just have one class. You don't just have the generic outdoor parkour class. Because if you do, you can't appeal to everyone's needs and you can't meet everyone's needs. You either have to create something appropriate for beginners, or you have to create something appropriate for regular practitioners, or you have to create something appropriate for advanced practitioners. So the first thing you have to kind of bear in mind is when you're thinking of which classes you're running, you have to be aiming them at different groups and almost sorting them to help them get to the class and the environment that they need the most.
Okay. So what, just sort of out of curiosity, what kind of classes do you offer in Glasgow? Where
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, sorry.
Edinburgh, yeah, no worries. We have a class called Back in the Game, which is what I was originally going to be presenting to us when we were going to talk about intergenerational practice, because Back in the Game is specifically aimed at teaching movement skills. And we moved that so far back to the point where we think anyone, and we mean anyone, could come to that class and gain benefit from it. We mean people who are heavily overweight. We mean people who are, for one reason or another, dealing with chronic injury. We mean people who have been sitting at a desk for 40 years and have back pain or have knee pain or have shoulder pain, can come to the class. And it's we actually designed it with a physiotherapist. And the aim of the class itself is to take these people who aren't used to moving and introduce them to movements that specifically have no way of hurting them. So they're all very healthy. They're all about teaching them how to move, and they're all about making sure that when they do so, there's no risk of them gaining a standard sport injury, which means they come back to class to get healthier and healthier, and they can move from a couch potato into someone who's capable of then joining a sports class. And I say that specifically because the next thing we do is we have the introductory sports class, or for us, parkour class. We have a parkour class which is aimed at them. And to a certain extent, the parkour class can cover a huge range. You can cover someone who's barely begun parkour, up to someone who's been coming to parkour for a few years, is quite experienced, has been doing their conditioning, they're getting strong. And that environment can be fantastic if people engage with it, because the great thing is that they all get pushed. You can operate at multiple levels, people can help each other. It can be a place which is very inclusive. But you then also have to think about the other end, which is if you bring in the 18-year-old monkey man who loves to do backflips and throw himself off things backwards into huge drops and really pushing the boundaries, and you put him in a class with that 30-year-old woman who you had to coax to class slowly and promise it wasn't a dangerous environment, you've lost everyone. So you need to have something at the top end and the bottom end, and then a more inclusive one in the middle, or at least that's how we do it. That's our Back in the Game class, parkour class, and we call it exploration class, but it might as well be thought of as an advanced class.
Yeah. So there was also a discussion going on in the Facebook group about teaching people according to a curriculum, and when someone, or what is the point when someone reaches that advanced level? Like, when does someone go from a beginner to an advanced practitioner? And I think it also plays into that topic of inclusivity, because as far as I know, for example, the people here at Parkour 1 in Berlin, they don't have beginners or advanced classes. They just have sort of a group training. I mean, they have beginners workshops for like 6 or 10 weeks, I'm not really sure. But then the training is not split into beginners and advanced. Like, what do you think about that?
I'd agree with it. You got anything to say, Alan?
Here at our gym, we have introductory classes that are pretty inclusive, and then as they advance through a curriculum, there allows separation for certain individuals to be pushed. But I certainly agree that like any curriculum should have programming for classes that allow for any individual to practice. I think it's good for new students or new movers to be around that kind of energy, and to see what human bodies are capable of, especially at what we would consider at a high level. But also it's good for advanced practitioners to, take a step back, be able to process all the movement that they practice, in terms of like communicating it, having coaches assign them to specific exercises that a coach thinks that they may need, and also just being around new movers and building like a community and building leadership.
Yeah. From a community perspective, I think there's definitely a huge amount of value in mixed level training. And I apologize if I came across as dissing that idea. I'd say more in terms of there should be something to get them there within that community. And once they're within that community, the advanced stuff is also, it has another place. I tend to think of that as being the parkour class and then the parkour jam in some ways. Often people from our community these days tend to almost graduate from class to jam, though we don't tell them it that way. In actual fact, we encourage them to come to both because they have different jobs. We generally see people who've been practicing parkour for many years move into the jamming and pushing themselves. And I think that makes a lot of sense, especially around their personal journey, which we should talk about when we get to loss of what we lose when we move to a class environment. However, I want to try something fancy here. If I hit this button, can I share? Yeah, let me try. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Wait.
All right.
Put that. Yeah. There we go.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Cool.
So this is one of the slides from my upcoming presentation at the Art of Retreat. I promise not to show the whole thing, Alan. But it sort of really pleasantly sums up what we've just been talking about. So here in the middle, here we have a line from someone who is broken to someone who is an elite athlete. And here in the middle, we have the sort of general range that the parkour class would cover. And then our exploration class is our advanced class, if you will. There's our absolute beginner parkour class, and they both push a little bit. And my physiotherapist-based class for Back in the Game very much covers that range at the very bottom there, which I think in general, we as a parkour community tend to be missing, but I think that's just because it's really difficult to do. But then at the very top, you'll see I've also popped down athlete development. And I think this is the thing. I don't think you should necessarily term it in terms of a curriculum, but I do think when you get to a certain point, you stop being, an athlete stops needing a class environment and begins needing programs training, mindset training, they need personal training, they need to be looking at their nutrition, and they need to be looking at a whole host of factors that turns them into an athlete rather than a student. And at that point in time, we do have to have something else. And I think actually the guys who are being the loudest and most interesting about this right now are very much Apex. A lot of the work they're doing right now in athlete development and their programs is certainly pushing the envelope that way, at least as far as I've seen so far.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess that slide sums it up really well also in terms of well, what I've been sort of pondering about lately was that idea of how far can I push individuals in my classes and sort of let them explore their limits, but also try not to lose the rest of the class. So when I see with one individual with a lot of potential and I see them, they want to express their potential but need a little bit of coaching up, how can I give that to them without then losing the rest of the class, either because I don't pay them enough attention or because the thing happens like he does a really spectacular jump and someone else is like, holy shit, I will never be able to do this. Why am I doing this?
Yeah, I think that's just part of classroom management skills. And I think part of just coaching theory is that in any class, you spend roughly an equal amount with each student. And for those that need extra attention, then that's something that you take outside of the classroom, whether that's through private training, through a different class module, having them in a higher class for like advanced curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it is also important to bear in mind that there can come a point when someone may need a different environment than a classroom in order to progress their training, because what we do in terms of the practice didn't evolve in a classroom, and there are aspects of it that can't be explored in a classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that's private training or open jam, or maybe they need to be pushed to independently train on it on their own. So
An important part of our jobs, like while we're teaching movement skills, we're also teaching parkour, and parkour is an individual practice. Parkour is a practice that happens when you challenge yourself. You can't challenge someone forever. They need to begin challenging themselves, and part of that is teaching them how to do that, and then letting them go and letting them fly.
Yeah, that was something actually in the beginning, like when I first started about coaching parkour, there was something that initially turned me off from it, because I was like, nah, everyone has to discover parkour for themselves, and who am I to tell anyone like what to do or how to challenge themselves? But I think that like this structured approach and offering like guided training sessions has actually also helped getting a more like diverse set of people to parkour. I don't know if that's just my perception, or would you agree? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely.
what was that?
Alan's gone. Alan's just. I 100% agree. I think that there are a set of people who will go out to a parkour jam, and they are people who, young men, for the majority. There's exceptions, but if you look at a community and you see it as being those who we talk about as having the most privilege in society, which is young, strong men, and they're the ones out doing your sport, you can't really be talking about it in terms of something that is inclusive. You're talking about it as something which may appear to be equal, but if it's equal, then those who have advantage are those who are going to thrive. The classes provide a much safer pathway. They provide a pathway for those who have an issue with going out into public. They've been classes are for those who have a reason why it's not simple. And we help them get up there. That we're being inclusive by running classes. So fundamentally, the first way you can be inclusive in a community is to run your class. Everything apart from that is side show.
Okay.
Shall we talk? On you go, Paul.
Yeah, I would have one more question that just came up for me. Is do you guys educate other coaches? Just because I would be curious to know how you address a topic like inclusivity in educating other coaches. Like, how do you bring that topic up at all? Is that something that you talk about with your trainers?
I beat it into their heads day in and day out.
And how do you do that? Do you just tell them that, like what sort of very practical things do you give them?
Very practical. I think the first thing you do is you have to watch the way they're running their sessions, and you got to talk about where they succeeded and where they failed. And you specifically got to talk about making sure that they are addressing the classrooms that they are in. So one of the things we often see is coaches showing an undue amount of attention. Coaches focusing an undue amount of attention on those who are succeeding. And there's two reasons for that. One is that they want to, and the other is they've structured their sessions in such a way that they reward people within the session for doing more by giving them more. And there's very practical ways you can deal with that in a classroom. One of my favorite ways of discussing, and sorry, I need to add another point before I talk about what I'm going to talk about. I'm getting ahead of myself. The other point of that is that is also discouraging those who are not managing within the classroom. And so the coaches focus more on the ones who are engaging with them and engaging with the material, and focusing less on those who are engaging less. For instance, the beginner can't do the running cat leap, so stands at the back of the queue and doesn't take their turn. If that's happening in your classroom, then that person's being discouraged, and it's not really the fault of the coach as such, but the coach hasn't found a way to get them involved. So one of the ways I talk to my coaches about is I talk to them about gateway. I make sure they always start with the simplest exercise, and they set the base at a point where everyone can engage in the classroom. So the first exercise you show, every single person in that class should be able to get. Wherever possible, you want to avoid the regression. Sometimes you pitch it wrong and you need to show a regression, a simpler version of something. But in general, you should show the most simple thing first, and you should be delivering your class such that you show the simple one, saying, if you get this, I'd like you to try this. And in some ways, you don't even have to go that advanced at that point. Then you can set the task, you can let them run, and then you can go over to the more advanced guys, and then you can give them a more advanced progression. Because what you're doing in that case is you're not discouraging anyone. And also the guys in the class who are more advanced should know that you're going to address the beginners first, and the task you set is going to be for everyone in the class, and they know their turn's coming. And they can, they can go and do 5 precision jumps, 10 precision jumps while you make sure everyone's landing properly. Then you come to them, then you can challenge them, then you can give them the more complex themes or what you actually want them to accomplish in a classroom. And by doing that, you're not discouraging the beginners, and you've wasted 10 seconds of the more advanced guys training, which really doesn't really matter. And anyway, they probably need to warm up and do those jumps anyway, because they've probably just gone to the biggest jump in the room because they're that sort of person.
Okay. Anything to
I did
add?
warn you to stop me ranting.
No, just to add on, I would totally agree, and that's how we run a lot of the classes here at ENSO. It's important that you have all students feel some sort of success in every classroom that they go to, and our theory is that you're always meeting the classroom with the student that's the least or the furthest away, and you meet them. You have the whole classroom meet them or that student on their path, and you move forward together. There are always ways for any coach, knowledgeable coach or experienced coach, to challenge more advanced practitioners, even with the simplest or the very first progression. And I think when you create a community or when you manage a classroom like that, not only does the beginner student feel success, but they also visually see where that success can take them as you continue to challenge those that are a little ahead or very far ahead.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the scalability of all the exercises or all the movements that you show in a class should be highlighted. And I think, yeah, it's very important to always focus on, because I mean, it's also it's for the coaches, it is sometimes really rewarding to work with successful people. So just to highlight that to them and say that it's, in terms of inclusivity, you really have to focus not to have people disengage, or especially in that moment, you have to go to them and ask them what are their problems, what are they struggling with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To slightly better answer the question you actually asked, though, which is how do we, on a more practical scale, teach our coaches how to become more inclusive? I've actually written a series of short Word documents. They can't be too long or my guys don't finish reading them. But highlighting various techniques they can... Sorry. Oh, man. Parkour coaches, they don't like reading. Highlighting specific methods they should take in the class, and I teach them to follow specific steps, and these specific steps will create inclusive environments, such as the gatewaying technique of making sure you show the most simple one first, of making sure when you build the class and you build your class plans, you're creating something which everyone can engage with to some extent or another. And we've just got them written in small documents, and we have training sessions with all of our coaches. So I've got 11 guys at Access Parkour, and then there's probably twice that number within Scotland who are teaching. So we invite everyone over. We talk through one of these documents. We talk through the skill applied in the document, and then we run training sessions. So if anyone has been on the ADAPT courses we run, something very similar to that as a day session where we talk about how you deliver these skills?
Yeah, I think ongoing discussions is very, very critical to any training team. We do something every 2 weeks in terms of just sending a small document that highlight issues that we've noticed in the gym, or maybe something that we just want to remind coaches of. Maybe like a short document or an essay that's 5 minutes. And because coaching, like getting a certification or becoming a coach at any organization, that's just the first step. And no different than students, it's an ongoing process. It's important to always like pick up and sharpen the coaching tools that we have. So
yeah. Shall we move on?
Cool. Yeah. So the second question that you sort of raised was, what does coaching parkour take away rather than training on your own, like discovering on your own, I guess.
I've got a rant ready about this as well. You guys want to chime in first? Have your own thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I already said a little bit about it. Like this paradox of parkour is very much about freedom and your own responsibility, and how do you sort of also bring that across in your trainings. That's like, how do you get people not only to come to your class twice a week, but actually go out by yourself? I mean, here in Berlin, it works quite well because we have a lot of like jams or gatherings and stuff, and I just always, if something's coming up, I just tell everyone in the class that this is a really good opportunity to well, put your skills to the test is maybe a wrong phrase, like just to sort of meet other people and explore a little bit more in a free realm. And especially with my I have one beginners and one advanced class at the moment. And especially in my advanced class, I try to also structure my training sometimes more openly, so that I give them just sometimes more like a vague task that they can then explore on their own. But yeah, I would like to hear your thoughts.
Well, for me, I agree. I think we can all agree that there is something lost from parkour when you move from a jam environment to a coaching environment. And I think once you have more advanced pupils, you can begin to explore some of those concepts, but never fully meet them until they're training on their own. And I see that in terms of a loss of the unique personal experience. So when I did parkour, when I started parkour, this is absolutely true. So I started parkour 14 years ago, all right? And 14 years ago, no one knew what a climb up was. No one knew it was possible to do a good climb up. So we used our knees, we used our elbows, we used everything possible. We just scrambled onto walls, and we were terrible. And you go back and you see some videos from that period, and you just like, I mean, this is pre-YouTube, luckily, so some of them are gone. But that's sort of the progressions and the pathways and what we've built over years of training. Some of what we did was right, and we became stronger. Some of what we did was wrong, and we got weaker, or we explored an idea or a concept that didn't work very well. But all of that is unique. You know, I experienced something mind-blowing. I literally experienced the birth of a new art form firsthand. Our students are never going to experience that. But I think the sort of the simple thing about that is that they're never going to experience it because they weren't there at that time. But what they can experience is the journey, their own journey, where they explore movement and they develop things. And I tend to think about this as it being a path. And can I share more stuff? I'm gonna try and see if I can share the next. It's another slide. Hold on, where is it? And screen share. Here we go. No, I've shared the wrong one. This one. So can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a bit difficult. Oh, hold on, let me try this. Can you see this?
Yeah. Yes.
You can only see the red line now.
Only the green one.
Yeah, we see a pyramid with a green line.
So can you see? Oh dear, can you see three? Let me try that again.
It might just be lagging, but we can only see. Now we see you.
All right, hold on. Then. You should now be able to see three lines. Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the red line is the first generation of practitioners, right? They found all sorts of ways to move. They explored the entirety of the movement potential, but they didn't get very far up the pyramid. The next group are those with the purple line, and those with the purple line, they learned from the first generation and were able to quickly surpass what they were capable of. But again, they began exploring this wide range of movement. They found a healthy practice, they became stronger, but they don't get all the way up the pyramid. The third generation comes along. Now, their first half of their journey is kept within this healthy movement. It's this safer, sanitized practice. They've learned from the previous generation's mistakes. They've moved on. They're not doing the crazy things that don't work. They're doing the stuff that works. They have good quality drills. They know the correct technique for the movements. They know how to push themselves but not break. They know how to deal with injuries. They know they have to stretch and condition and rehabilitate themselves, make themselves stronger. And so, in actual fact, the first half of their journey might be sanitized, the same as everyone else's. But at some point, once they move beyond the coaching, once they move into their own athlete development, even they get to explore and move and have their own potential and have their own unique personal experience. I think it just has to come later. Because when you have a practice that's maturing and developing like ours, we will discover better ways to do things, and therefore we'll encourage our students to do the ones that we think are easy and positive. And that means that they lose the ability to work it out for themselves, which is part of parkour. You know, challenging yourself and figuring it out and solving it and having this unique life experience. You can't have that if you're not the first generation, or at least you can't have that immediately, but they do still get to explore it. It just, they have to learn this huge database of movement, push themselves beyond what their coaches could possibly ever have learned to do, and into this whole new range of movement. Like, I saw a guy do a side flip, half turn into a side flip on the other side yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even imagine how that would be physically possible. But of course, that's the thing. Each generation, the young guys will come up with things that we can't imagine as having been possible. And then, you know, they'll go in and they'll start teaching, and they'll come up with kids who will develop things that that blow our minds, but blow their minds too. And that's, of course, is the beauty of the development of the discipline. But that does mean that the base of the discipline becomes a bit more boring, a bit more sanitized. It becomes a bit more, this is movement. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like, I find this pyramid to sum up a lot of my thoughts about this too. I mean, I also started parkour 9 years ago, and the first thing that we did was like go out and jump from the highest things that we could find for like a month. There was just the training, and then our knees started hurting, and we were like, fuck, maybe that's not the right way. So I definitely agree that like that guided training can definitely make this healthier practice for a lot of people, just to be aware of all the basics, like how do you warm up, how do you do cool downs, how do you rehab an injury properly. I wish I knew that 9 years ago. And I think having a coach there or a trainer is really, really useful. However, I really like to put my beginners through, like I usually have 1 or 2 sessions where I tell them, today we're going to do an old school yamak kind of training session. And we're just going to do like an hour of QM, like just, I don't know, go really nuts on these old school kind of things, just so they also have this experience how it can be, what parkour also can be, just to give them like a sort of a broader approach to it. It doesn't have to be this or that, but like this was how the original guys trained, like, well, 2 hours. That's kind of a joke, but I like to, yeah. Go ahead.
I think it's a bit more complicated than that, though, because sometimes when you see that from the outside, you sort of think, this is how they trained. No, that's where their training is now.
Yeah.
Because what has actually happened is they've been training hard for, literally decades beyond what we've been training, and they've gotten to a point where that is their training regime, because that is providing them with what they need. And that's a little bit different from the training having evolved. Like, actually, when they were young, they did crazier shit than you can possibly imagine. In fact, they did stuff that was way less safe and way more mad. But it's their training themselves has come to a point where it's become this solid demonstration. The crawling, like, they didn't start crawling for an hour. What they did was they built up the crawling to the point where it got to an hour.
Yeah, you hear stories of them playing volleyball with boulders and just hanging each other off. A lot of crazy stuff. And
yeah, they did
I
that.
think as they grew older and much wiser, hopefully, they realized that, what we think of Yamak is the heavy conditioning sessions for 4 hours, 6 hours. And I think that's what John's right about.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, what other thoughts do you have? Like, what does, or how do you approach that topic? Like, how do you get people to also go training outside of your classes, or is that something that you do in any sort of way, or do you just let it sort of flow, I guess?
I think it comes down to proper, like in a curriculum or in any lesson planning. It comes with a lot of creativity or creating space for a lot of creativity, and also a lot of discussion, group discussions with the class. For me as a coach, there might be some games we play with very little rules or a lot of rules, and that allows for students to openly explore movement without a lot of input from a coach. And then also just having discussions like why exploration beyond the classroom, beyond having a coach, without others or maybe with others is important. And when you're able to demonstrate that, I think a student learns the value of parkour, the value of self-exploration, and also independent challenges.
Yeah, I'd quite like to pick up on that point. I think you're totally right. And the idea of role models and the importance of role models in society is something that isn't explored quite enough. We are a group of strong, healthy, positive role models. And we're just wandering in society and we're beginning to teach. And we live our lives by these values that are very, very positive. And especially in those who subscribe to the Yamak, the Lab de Déplacement style of parkour, rather than the more, shall we say, skateboarding aligned style of parkour that we see. Those values make us the type of people that parents want their kids to grow up to be like. They give us strength, and we, simply by living our lives in this way, we inspire those who follow us to live lives that are a lot more positive. And I think that's something that needs to be said more, because it kind of it's a bit intimidating to realize that you inspire almost everyone who walks through the door of your class or your gym or whatever, but you do. And therefore you should look and act like it. And that itself is one of the things. So if you go back to a lot of the really basic, if you get past the difficulty of language interpretation with the Yamak, one of the things you tend to find is this desire to fulfill their potential. It's a really basic idea, and one of the ways they want to do that is they just want to be everything they can be. That's where the to be useful part comes from. And I think that one of the things we have to do is we have to live that idea as well. We have to try and be everything we can be. We have to inspire these children to be more, and we have to stand up in community and say, you know what, you should be healthy, you should eat properly, you should take care of your body, you should help others, and you should be a positive person. And there's nothing more that we can do that has any more value than that. That bit's helping.
Yeah, I totally agree. Of the 200 or 300 students that we have, parkour is but just a small facet of their lives. Coming into a classroom maybe once a week, twice a week for an hour and a half. They go to school. They have relationships with families, friends. They might play other sports. They have other interests, and it's important as a coach to challenge them in the classroom, but also to embody values that demonstrate strength and that you can always grow in other ways beyond fitness, in diet, and being honest with others. In all aspects of your life.
Yeah, I guess I really resonate with that point on like embodying the values that you want to sort of share. And I guess a lot of the inclusivity also comes from the kind of culture or atmosphere that you create in your community more broadly, or in your classes. And especially what Hedge said earlier about going to paying special attention to the people that are maybe not engaging as much. I think something like that shows the other students some of the core principles, like start together, finish together, things like that. And I guess when you create such an atmosphere, you also, or hopefully, get people or get a more diverse set of people to engage in your classes and maybe tell other people about it that they normally wouldn't have.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a little bit more of a abstract thing, like how do we shape atmosphere and culture in our classes? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm distracted because I'm trying to pull up and see if anyone's talked to us on the live chat, but no one has talked to us on the live chat.
No, I'm having an eye on it, but 2 people are watching, so. No, the live chat is more, or the YouTube thing is more as a storage thing, so people can watch it later, especially like, I don't know, people in Australia or India are like it's 2 a.m. in the morning there right now, so.
Yeah. I think one of the nice things to kind of almost try and come full circle to the point I originally picked up on is that inclusive practice, I said practical inclusive practice. And yeah, I mean, I can sit here and tell you about how to tweak your advertising so that it reaches more groups, or to reach out to different people and how you go about it. But it's just about creating an environment where people want to be. And then once you create an environment where people want to be, the next thing you have to do is you have to step out of that environment, walk into environments where there are people who you don't normally engage with, and engage with them. And that is something that is terribly difficult. It is it's difficult for me to get into the heads of someone else. I don't know how it's done. I cannot figure out what's going on in the head of the middle-aged woman and why on earth she's at my parkour class. I can just work as hard as I possibly can to create an environment where she feels happy. And if she's coming back, I've done it right. I don't know what's going on in the heads of all these different little communities of people, whether or not they are a different community because of the fact that they speak another language, or because they come from a different religion, or just maybe they have an odd and special sexuality, which means they're sitting in their own little world. All of these different groups, for whatever reason, they're in different little groups. You have to almost always step out of your world, step out of your comfort, and you have to walk into their world, talk their language. And then once you've done that, you can maybe begin engaging them with your principles and your ideas. And that's very difficult to do. It's scary to do, and it's intimidating to do. But in order for us to get more people doing what we do, we need to go and engage all of them. So there's a million ways to do that, and every single one is hard, which is why I think that being inclusive isn't necessarily something you have to do, or if that should do, because you can't engage with every single little community. You can only engage with a few of them. But every single time you get an opportunity to go out of your comfort zone, to meet people in a different society and show them what you're doing and learn about what they're doing, and always, always, always make it a two-way path. Always go, right, this is what I have. Who are you and what do you want? What are your values? What are your words? Buzzwords. I used to hate buzzwords. Now I think buzzwords are the most important thing in the world. If a group of people that I'm engaging with all want to lose weight, I can talk to them about how parkour will help them lose weight. I'll also tell them a little bit about how parkour will help them put on weight, but that's a different thing as well. If I use the words that make them engaged with the subject, then they listen to me. And if they listen to me, that's great. Because even if they disagree with me, they'll have a discussion, and then they'll go away thinking about what I'm doing, and they'll consider coming to a parkour class. But they won't if I just speak my language, because my language is built around, I mean, if you listen to Julie and Andy talk about it, they'll tell you that parkour is hyper-masculine. I'm not sure I entirely disagree with them. And in order to stop it being that, we need to go and find all the other people, which means we have to leave our comfort zone. We can't wait for them to come into our worlds. More on that.
Tuna.
I can't hear you, Alan.
One part of inclusive practices is also having or developing the right tools to engage with groups of people. You know, let's say just for someone who doesn't have an arm, or someone who has to have a wheelchair. Not every coach or every person is able to work with those kinds of people, and having the right tools is definitely something that has to you just have to have as a coach. And then secondly, a small practice that we have at our gym is when a student or when someone new comes in and we don't see them again, they just don't come back. Sometimes we just send them a small email, and ask, why, what was it that that kept you away from the gym? And a lot of the times, just having opened that dialogue, you can often hear things that can help improve your classroom and be a little bit more inclusive, or maybe even less inclusive.
Does that work? Sending an email to those who don't. Yeah, interesting.
It's a small percentage. Usually it might be something as small as it just doesn't work for our schedule. But sometimes you might hear something about, the chemistry between the coach and the student didn't work. The coaching style of the programming was maybe a little too fast paced, or maybe they were looking for something a little different. So whether it be progressions, whether it be higher energy, maybe less conditioning, or maybe a wide variety of different things. And obviously you take all that feedback with a grain of salt, but it does allow for you to open dialogue with communities that you sometimes don't engage with, as they do filter through a gym.
Cool. I never thought about doing it as a personal email. We blitz out in general terms to people if they don't come back and ask them to come back and if they want anything or to give us feedback. But I've always done it in a very much I've got an automated service that does it. The idea of doing it personally, of course it would work. Why wouldn't it? Don't know, I've never thought of it. Cool.
Even if it's 1 or 2 people. So.
Nice. Okay. Anything else that you guys want to share at the moment? I think.
I do think as coaches or parkour coaches is something that's very important is to sit down with like-minded individuals of other fitness areas to get more exposure and get ideas. No different than this parkour exchange, but you know, I sit down with people from yoga or from the aerial arts and get ideas and exchange ideas because oftentimes they have experiences with other community groups that we just don't have in our parkour community right now. It provides a lot of insight and expertise.
Yeah, definitely. I think that recently I started to dabble a little bit in different dance forms, and the coaching is so different. Like it's so much more vague, and they just tell you now be a little more soft, or think of that while you do that movement. And it's something that I've not experienced in parkour coaching so far, but it's something that might. So I've been trying it a little bit to implement it in my classes, and it's something that works really well to give everyone, sorry, how did I say that? To give everyone their unique challenge without having to address everyone individually. Because if I just tell them now, try to do as softly as possible, like a certain line or a movement that we have been working on, everyone else will have a different understanding of it and just explore it in their own different ways. And yeah, I guess we can learn a lot from different movement arts or fitness sort of modalities. Yeah.
It's a cool idea. I think that from our perspective, I've always done it a bit ruthlessly. Like for me, it's always been a case of I go to a different environment to try and steal what's best from their environment, which is maybe not the best way to think about it in your own head. The way you guys think about it is much more pleasant. But I fully believe that parkour coaching is a very young art, and I think that we have yet to scratch the surface of. I think it will look completely different in 10 years' time. I think that the tools that are available now are stone hand tools compared to what we could be doing and what could work. And we'll get there, and we'll learn from other disciplines, and we'll progress, and we'll create more confident, more amazing, more inspirational coaches, and we'll use the tools that inform our parkour practice to inform our coaching practice, and hopefully we will become as gods walking the earth.
Yeah, that's a good goal too.
Small goals, small baby steps.
Yeah, baby steps.
World domination, all that.
Cool. All right, guys. I think we're also we've talked for 15 minutes now. Is there anything else that you would like to share now in the end? Or
I've got a lot more thoughts, but it was a really pleasant experience for me to try and vocalize some of it. It's made me rethink the way I'm going to present some of the material. But yeah, no, I think I'm really happy with that. Sorry for ranting.
It was interesting ranting, no worries.
I kind of feel like I didn't get across any of my points, but at the same time got across lots of interesting points.
I have plenty of time if you guys want to continue the conversation.
Well, what would be your the main point that you would want to get across, Hedge?
I think that there's an awful lot of a big misunderstanding in the terms inclusivity and equality. And I think that parkour is a practice that promotes equality, because we test ourselves against the environment, and we either can do the movements or we can't. The environment doesn't care about your background, it doesn't care about who you are, it doesn't care about how you feel today, it doesn't care whether or not your legs hurt. The movement can either be done or it isn't. And I think the great thing about that is it teaches you an awful lot about yourself, which is why it's amazing. But I don't think that it naturally tends towards being inclusive, as in bringing people together, because by virtue of being something that provides equality, it will always favor those who are the most privileged. So for me, it makes sense that the community is the way it is, which is young, strong men. That makes sense because of what it is. And that's not bad. I think that's the bit that really bugs me. Parkour in its present form and what it's presently created and how it presently isn't inclusive, and that's okay. And then what you actually should be doing, is justifying why we should be bringing it to more people, because that leads us to much better answers and much better questions, which is, why do we think that this thing we have should be learned by everyone? Why do we think we should disrupt the way we've been doing things so far to bring it to everyone? Because by doing so, it changes. And that's okay. And I think the reasons are reasonably obvious, but I think that's where the discussion should be being had right now. I don't think the discussion should be as simple as, well, we're just doing a bad job in reaching people. I actually think the discussion should be, why should we be reaching people? What do we have to share with them? Because once we've defined what we have to share with them, and what we have that we think is unique about parkour, and what we have that we think has value, and the bits of our discipline that are different. This is one of the reasons why I'm very anti-competition. The bits of our discipline that are unique and special are the bits that we should be sharing, because there are already things out there in this world that are, you want to watch some of the most skilled movers in the world? Go and watch ballet, go and watch break dancing if you want to look at innovative movement. There are already disciplines out there who are doing things that are absolutely mind-blowing. And if we just become another one of them, I think we miss an opportunity to give something unique to the world.
So you think parkour has a unique ability to potentially be inclusive because of its non-competitive nature?
I think that the message of creating non-competitive environments in order to have conversations about value is something that is really important. I think, especially in the West, and this is one of the reasons why the idea of different societies having different things. In the West, competition is everything. Being the best is the point of existing. If you're not the best, you failed, and that's just wrong. There are so many values that we can hold that make us better as people that do not revolve around which one of us is the best. And I think parkour is a vessel for us to deliver a discussion about those values and what they are.
Yeah, it all comes down to education for us to continue bringing parkour to groups that have very little access or don't even know that parkour exists as a tool. Making sure that we're creating positive learning environments that share different values of parkour and not just competition. Definitely outreach and education that, that all that increases just engagement. And, to build better inclusivity practices, it means having separate classrooms or class styles that allow different types of people access to every part of parkour in different ways. So I think it'll grow as we continue to grow as a sport in gaining new resources So getting new perspectives from experienced coaches and looking at other sports and seeing how they cast a wider net to a wider audience than what we have right now.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember the exact quote, but Julie wrote something in the Parkour research group once, something about like not only sharing the images that inspire us personally, but also that can inspire other people. Because I think that's a lot, also a reason, like the whole project that she's doing with See and Do is like the visual culture of parkour is so dominated by a certain set of people that it's not really, the people cannot even imagine themselves doing it because they have not seen themselves doing it. And that goes back to what Hedge also said about role models. Like we need people that show that it's even possible for them. And I guess then also maybe our responsibility in maybe promoting classes, like what images do we use to promote our classes? What do those images show? What kind of what kind of image of parkour are we putting out into the world?
Yeah, Alice Popejoy, I think last year did a discussion on even just having a woman instructor helps provide outreach and education for women who want to learn parkour. Because when a woman steps into a male-dominant classroom, not only do they often feel intimidated, but they visually and like they just can't see themselves. They don't like not having that empathy or not seeing themselves as equals in a classroom that's just all males. Yeah. So when you do have images of different types of practitioners moving and practicing parkour, it definitely educates and casts a wider net for new groups.
I think you can actually take that thinking one step further, which is that the women who have historically anyway walked into parkour environments are women who feel comfortable in male-dominated environments, which are generally women who aren't necessarily going to want to create female-only spaces, which is in itself kicking your own self in the ass, because you've managed. So we specifically found this problem, which was the first couple of women we tried to get involved in parkour coaching didn't actually care about creating female-only environments, because they quite liked their male-only environments. They quite liked parkour as it was. That's why they were there. And it took us a long time to sort of build up a community of people to find female coaches who had an interest in getting more women into parkour. And it's the same thing. You've got to make sure that they have that value, because otherwise you're not pursuing the goal you thought you were pursuing. It's positive discrimination at its worst, potentially. I had something else to say about. So this is for me, for what we do as Access Parkour, where we're specifically focused on the very early stages of introducing movement skills as well as parkour, and we sort of tried to build a bridge as far back as possible. We regularly run these back in the game classes, and when we do, we regularly entirely remove the word parkour from our advertising. And I thought I'd just raise that now, because it kind of comes in with the stuff that you've talked about, Paul. And you can have a discussion whether what you want to use the word parkour or free running or ladder de placement or urban brick touching or whatever you want to talk, ninja warrior. Each one of these words appeals to different people for different reasons. That's great, whatever. But we actually don't use parkour for the movement classes at all. So when we create the flyer, we make sure to advertise using movement, get back in the game, improve your flexibility, learn movement skills. We use lots of words. We don't use parkour. And I'm telling you this because it leads to a very funny story, which is a woman who came along to our class. She's in her 50s, and her friends recommended she come to this class. So she comes along, and I teach her how to squat, and I stretch out her hips, And I do a lot of talk about how to stand and move properly, and we do a whole lot of exercises about sitting down and getting up. She loved it. It was really healthy. She felt good the next day. She went and told all of her friends in the office. Specifically, she went and told all her friends in the office that she'd done this thing called parkour. So her friends then began showing her some YouTube videos, as you can expect, of guys throwing themselves off buildings or doing double beginner backflip, 360, prees to whatever. But because she'd been exposed to it in that order, it led to this really interesting thing, which instead of being shocked and saying parkour is dangerous, oh God, she came back with 1,000 interested questions about what the link was. Because this thing that she'd seen in the far distance that she was vaguely aware of happening, the fact that she'd managed to come to a classroom, do it, she called parkour, meant that she had a completely different base understanding, which was fantastic because she wasn't scared off. She wasn't scared by the idea of parkour. She wanted to know why this amazing, accessible discipline was linked with this crazy thing. The story's made it funnier because there was also a woman a bit older in her 70s who comes to the same class, who, when she heard this discussion, told me that I shouldn't do that parkour thing because it's very dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, that just talks to the power that words have, and that the image of parkour as this, like, as soon as people hear parkour, they're already like, no, that's too dangerous. I can never do that. Maybe they don't even start looking at offers that are out there. And yeah, if you start changing your language to more like movement or play games, movement games, stuff like that, maybe that sort of brings people in just to then to then also maybe progress towards parkour or whatever. But yeah,
and you don't have to deny you're doing parkour. You don't have to. You don't have to say this isn't a parkour class. You just don't use the word in the original advertising. And when you get to it, it's like, oh yeah, technically this is a parkour class. Then at least they've got a positive base from which to build an idea. Parkour does have this external reputation. You can't control it, so work within it, work with its boundaries, work with its possibilities, and don't be ashamed of it. I know a lot of people talk about reaffirming the word or reclaiming the word, saying this is what the word means. Parkour is actually this very safe discipline. You can try, but people have YouTube. People watch crazy parkour fails. Embrace the word, understand its meaning, and use it appropriately, and also don't use it appropriately. It's not bad to advertise your class if you're doing something which doesn't meet people's expectations. Because if you advertise a parkour class and you don't offer big jumps and throwing yourself off things and all the crazy fun stuff, you're also doing a disservice to your advertising, because people have a very different expectation as to what they will then do.
Yeah, no different than coaching cues, like being hard or being soft, letting movement. And at the end of the day, as a coach, you're passing on values, not necessarily the idea of parkour itself or definition. What matters the most.
Cool. Shall we finish there?
Yes. That sounds good. I think I don't have anything to add so far. Cool.
Great. Great discussion, guys.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. Thanks for participating.
Shame no one else could turn up.
Yeah, so for the next meeting, I thought we'll just discuss the possible topics in the group, possibly like let people share whatever they want to discuss, maybe have some sort of vote or system by which to decide what the next discussion should be. I still have some in mind that I would get some very specific people for, and I'm trying to reach out to them and just see whenever they are available. So I will just, and also if you guys have anyone that has maybe a special expertise on anything related to parkour coaching, and like just ask them if they would interested in this project.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about it in the group. I think I'm really interested in the intergenerational discussion. Getting Julie and Nancy into discussion and just hearing what they have to say about that whole area. Because it's, again, a research focus for us because of the work we're doing.
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to watch it or participate, but I don't think it's a discussion worth having without them. I think something linked in with this about advertising, if you want to go down that route, then you should definitely try and get Keel involved. He doesn't do a lot of parkour coaching, but he does. But he's Andy Day. He's a parkour photographer, and he was actually, I think he's in Berlin right now.
Yeah, I met him yesterday.
There we go. He's definitely someone you want to get having discussions. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, then let's end it here, and I see you guys hopefully next time. Or
yeah.
Thanks again for organizing this, Paul.
Yeah, it's a nice chat, Paul. Shame no more people came.
Well, I guess it just has to get some traction.
Yeah.
As does anything else.
Yeah.
Speak later, guys.
Cool. See ya.
Yeah.
Bye.